الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Islamic Center at New York University podcast, coming to you straight from the heart of New York City. We're building an amazing Muslim community here at ICNYU where everyone is welcomed and respected no matter where you're from or where you're at. This is the place to be. So open your ears and your heart and come along with us on another life-changing journey. Bismillah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا مولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله. In the name of Allah, the gracious, the merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of the universe, the Master of the Day of Judgment. I bear witness and testimony to the oneness of Allah, to His magnificence, His omnipotence, His might, His glory, to His being the creator and sustainer of all things, the giver of life, the guider of hearts, the Master of the Day of Judgment. And I bear witness to the fact that Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is His servant and final messenger. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him and upon all those who choose to tread His path until the last day. For the last months, we've been looking at a particular set of verses from the 25th chapter of the Quran, Surah Al-Furqan, which Allah gives a very detailed description of a category of His servants known as the Ibad al-Rahman. May Allah make us from amongst them. In a recognition that many of these qualities gave a well-rounded understanding of a whole individual, rooted in a sense of conviction, belief, practice, etiquette, theology, ethics, values, character. And that onset, that initial verse, that the Ibad al-Rahman, they're those who walk on the earth with grace, with dignity, continues now to give us about a dozen characteristics. And then these last verses that we're going to look at, after all of that description is done, gives an indication of what these Ibad al-Rahman they obtain, not in a worldly sense, but in an otherworldly sense. Before looking at that verse, you want to be able to think now that everything that came after, where it said Ibad al-Rahman, is just describing this group of people. Verse after verse, continuity to the description, giving a deep opportunity for reflection that the giver of this book to us, Azawajal, is not simply coining a phrase that is with ambiguity, but with specificity that gives a deep insight to the reciprocation of proximity, of not just the servant to Ar-Rahman, but of Ar-Rahman to the servant as well. And when you have a deep love for somebody, you can't stop talking about them in so many different ways. You're able to offer so much insight and so much nuance in terms of what it is that they are about and what it is that they mean to you. If someone was to say to you, to tell me about the one that is so close to you, that you love so much, a child in your life, a spouse, a significant other, a parent who struggled so much for you, maybe even yourself. And you just couldn't stop talking. If I stood here and spoke to you about my baby girl, Medina, well, I didn't even know what love meant in that way until she was born in this world. To the extent that when my wife was pregnant with our son, I said to her, I don't think I'm going to like him so much. Not because I was trying to be mean, but I just couldn't understand how I could possibly love somebody as much as I loved this little girl. Not only did I love him so much as well, but that love did not cause my love for him to diminish the love that I had for his big sister. And all it did was make me be more in love with their mother than I thought was possible. And I can stand here and talk to you about them for hours without stopping. That's how Allah talks about you as his creation. He didn't give it just one sentence or one description. But he's saying to you that this is who you are. This is who you are meant to be. This is what you mean to me. There's nothing that Allah gives to us in the Quran that is not achievable. And you have to understand that as fact. It doesn't mean that it comes always with ease. It doesn't mean that there's not struggle and we won't make mistakes. But you gotta want it the way you want other things. You want to aspire to say that I want to be from the Ibad al-Rahman. I want to be from those who possess these qualities, these traits, these characteristics. If you really want it, the first indication to you is that when you left from this place, that you have already gone and looked at Surah Al-Furqan again for yourself. And it's been the last 2-3 months that we have had khutbah after khutbah going through all of these verses. You haven't gone and looked at it once. Take a breath and tell yourself that today you're going to go pick it up. Whether it's a translation, it's the direct Arabic of the Quran, a tafsir that gives you an explanation, but you're going to go look at the verses. If you want it, you will go and do that. You can't connect to it just in a sense that it's intangible. You got to pick up the book and read it. And then after you determine for yourself that it's something that I've removed distractions, and I'm going to say this to you as your brother who loves you, you should want it. You should want it, and you should aspire towards building what you need to have a thirst for it. Because none of the things that we described and what Allah tells us of in these verses is something that's detrimental. It is just benefit upon benefit upon benefit. So after you want it, you go and you read it. It's the third step. You sit down and you reflect upon it. You contemplate it. You engage the text. And you don't do so in a self-deprecating way, but with real introspection, real contemplation that's productive. That says, how do I bring some of this into my life? And that will make us from the Ibad al-Rahman. In the 75th verse of this chapter, he now gives to us an understanding of what it is that the gain is. So all of this has just been description. And then he says, Ulaika, that is called Ismul Ishara. It's giving an indication towards something. So it's going back all the way now, multiple verses before to the Ibad al-Rahman. Yujzawna. They're the ones that are given jaza, reward. And that jaza is what? Al-Ghurfata, it says. Bima sabaru is the first part of this verse. Yujzawna is a verb that is done in the passive tense. Grammatically, when you have something that's passive, it means that in a sentence structure, the subject is not performing the verb, but in a latter part, you have something else that is performing the verb. So if you had a sentence that says, the tail was wagged by the dog, it's passive because the dog is wagging and it's not the tail that is associated with the verb. Does that make sense? The tail was wagged by the dog. Probably don't speak English like this, but that's in a passive form. If you say the dog wagged the tail, it's active because the subject is the one that is doing the wagging. So yujzawna in the passive is the Ibad al-Rahman are not rewarding themselves. They're being rewarded by Allah. And what they're being rewarded with is a key point in being able to understand now the distinction between what is contemporary, colloquial, even modern standard Arabic, and what is classical Arabic? Because the word ghurfa today just means room. You could call this a room. You could call where we pray downstairs a room. You could call your bedroom a room. In classical Arabic, the ghurfa is not in reference to just a room simply. It's still in Jummah. So if you got just a room in Jummah, be happy. May Allah make us all people of Jummah. But the ghurfa in specific is denoting the highest point of Jummah. It's saying that within the 7 heavens, it's in the 7th heaven to its highest degree. And the ghurfa is not in reference to just a small space, but it's in a space that understands it to be large, expansive. What you can understand in the context of the city that we live in today, that there's people who live on the first floors and there's people who live all the way at these high rises at the penthouse. The ghurfa is giving an indication on what's at the highest point, the largest, most luxurious. This is a verse that's describing to you what Jannah is like. And just like we said, you gotta want to be from the Ibadah Rahman. You gotta ponder upon these verses and recognize the reality of the eternal existence. May Allah make us people of Jannah. And then think about it not as cursory belief or conviction, but think about it as something that I have a relationship with, that I understand the proportionality of this world in relation to the world that comes beyond this one. What am I working for aspirationally? What is it that I'm really seeking to go towards? There's a deep wisdom in being able to recognize that the early followers of pretty much every single messenger sent to this world were those who were destitute, those that came from lower income backgrounds, those that were people who suffered inequity and oppression. They buy into a message that's telling you that your worldly existence is not going to be the end, but a means to something. And if you persevere, it goes on this verse to say that jaza is given to them, that ghurfa bima sabaru. The ba here is a ba of causation because of what they endured. Their sabr. May Allah make us from the sabirin. It's not just patience in the sense that I sit there and I do nothing. You're not meant to be balul. The way Allah says, that He made the earth balul for you. An animal that's a beast of burden is balul. The donkey that carries all of your bags, the luggage that you have upon a camel when you're going on a caravan, it's submissive in that sense. Sabr is something that's rooted in endurance, patience, perseverance. And when it says bima sabaru, what the Mufassirin say is that it's interesting that this verse does not then qualify the sabr in relation to anything in specific. They're not in a place of sabr in relation to family issues or job loss or insecurity of that kind. They're not in a place of sabr in relation to problems with their identity or struggles that stem from all kinds of different systemic challenges. It doesn't qualify the sabr in any way because each one of us is going to face unique things in our life. And so what might be agitating for one is not agitating for someone else. What might create inward conflict for one is not going to create inward conflict for another. You are specific. The most precious part of you is your heart. You are not in a state where you have this homogeneous experience that every single one of us is meant to be exactly the same. But you can embrace everything that makes you uniquely you, and being open to an understanding that in any phase of your life, there's still opportunity for you to learn about yourself. And those that endure, they recognize that there's something coming that's much bigger than this. This is not it. And it doesn't always have to be things that we read that give us an indication that patience and resilience is simply rooted in what is perceived the most difficult of circumstances. Yes, Bilal radiallahu anhu had a boulder pushed against his chest again and again and again, so that he was forced to recount his faith. He didn't falter, and he responds in every instance, Ahadun Ahad, the one, affirming his unique monotheism in response to their theological understanding of what God was conceptualized to be at that time. You have the reality of so many of the companions, may Allah be pleased with all of them, that went through deep struggle, deep difficulty. Your pain is subjective. You don't want to undermine it by somehow saying just because it's not what someone else is going through means that it's that less heavy. All you're doing there is giving shaitan victory over yourself. And the second part to this that you want to understand, you have your struggles. That means everybody else also uniquely has theirs. So you don't want to meet people with platitudes in response to the struggles that they have. A platitude being a statement that lacks substance. It might seem like you're saying something at a face value, but in reality, you're not saying anything at all. And that person's still trying to figure out how to make sense of their life, and all you've told them is have more trust in Allah, be more patient, have more faith, which is more to validate your passivity rather than being an empathetic source of support, sometimes acknowledging, I don't know what to do in this situation. I can't appease my own nafs by other than giving you an answer. And then you try to figure it out that I have this difficulty, plus this guy just told me I need to have more faith, so maybe I'm weak in my iman. Well, you're not weak in your iman. Life can be hard sometimes. And these verses are important to reflect upon because they give us a reminder and indication that there's something much bigger in store. You are a created individual, but you were created for eternal existence. May Allah make us all people of Jannah. If you don't stop to think sometimes and to reflect upon it, if you don't sit for a moment with yourself and ask yourself, what am I working towards? What's really the point of all of this? And as a message, it was challenging. It's a Meccan surah. If you remember, we said that. The people who create stratification in society, they don't want to hear that they're going to probably be in a place in the world beyond this one with people who don't have as much money as them, or not of the same race as them, or not of the same ethnicity as them, who come from different backgrounds together. There's a deep wisdom that the initial theologies in our tradition taught us of were a oneness of God, which we call Tawheed, and the existence of an afterlife. Remove all the Orientalist nonsense out of your head. Take out all of the clutter that gets weaponized by those who seek to benefit by making you self-loathing. And understand that a foundational theology in this religion of Islam is the belief that there's a world beyond this. And think about how that belief plays out in your day-to-day decision-making. And all of the verses that we talked about before, the characteristics of the Ibad al-Rahman, they walk with grace and dignity. When the ignorant speak to them, they respond with peace. They make dua for protection from Jahannam. They're neither extravagant nor miserly in their spending. Verse after verse after verse. That's how somebody who believes in Jannah will live their life. Because they get it. They get what this is all about. They recognize what it is that's going to be coming. And so that jaza is the highest level of Jannah, al-ghurfa. And it's a result, bima sabr, because of that willingness to endure. The Quran gives us a lot of reasons for the purpose of creation. And of it, it speaks about ibtila. When Allah Azza wa Jal talks to us about why we're created, الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا. You gotta have a growth mindset and shift the paradigm inwardly. The believer state is such that you're meant to be able to see things with depth. That's what beauty is. Not to see it simplistically, but to see it in all of its entirety. And to recognize that gratitude is not meant to be something that has you pretend like there's no challenges in the world. But gratitude is a vision modifier that enables you to see the difficulty in a different way, subjectively. When you have struggle, you understand and can recognize that other people have struggled too. And then you meet them, you walk with them, you carry their burden, compassion, understanding, love, support. You don't try to intellectualize or explain someone's pain away. So you reflect on these verses. You start to reflect upon what my state is in relation to this. وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ, the Quran says. In Allah مَعَ الصَّابِرِينَ, the Quran says. Again and again and again, it talks to us. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. You read these verses more so than probably others, but taking from them and then actualizing through reflection, contemplation. What does a person of sabr look like? And I gotta want to be that. Because I love for my brother what I love for myself, I don't ever want to be the reason as to why somebody has to be patient. I don't want to ever be the source of impediments in someone else's life. I want to be what helps them remind themselves of what they can be, not what is the cause of them having to increase in their sabr, because I am now the difficulty, I am now the challenge. What our teachers tell us is that there's a few different ways that sabr can be identified. You have a patience to be able to commit and fulfill what it is that Sharia asks you to. You engage in what the practices are, and then at the second level, you refrain from what it prohibits. That there's a sabr that's engaged in terms of the shahwa, the desire. And then the third frame is that when challenge comes, obstacle comes, difficulty comes, that you're able to now move forward with a recognition that I'm going to be able to take this on. And think again, in the context of this Meccan society, these verses are coming down. The people whose hearts are being spoken to in the moment, and whose hearts are being shut down. The ones who were the initial opponents of the messenger of God, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Abdurrahman ibn Auf was a Sahaba who had accumulated a lot of wealth. The Prophet ﷺ tells him that there's nothing wrong with that. But just know that when the day of judgment comes, you're going to be taken into account much longer, because he has more things to be taken into account for. If you don't have so much, there's not so much to be taken into account for. If you got a lot of things, then it's going to be a longer process. It's not just materialistic things. But this is why Amr ibn al-As, when he is a governor at the end of his life, and his son Abdullah sees him in tears as he approaches death, and he says, what are these tears for? He says, there's 3 phases of existence that I had. That at a time, I hated the messenger so much, and I wanted nothing less but to cause him hurt and pain. And he said, a second phase in which I then accepted this religion, and had I left this world in that state, perhaps I would have had hope for myself. He said, now I leave in a position of authority. And all of these people have the opportunity to stand on the day of judgment to say whether I fulfilled the rights they had over me. You own a lot of stuff. All the wealth that you have, it's not a problem. Years later, Abdurrahman ibn Auf comes into Medina. And he has as a merchant all of these things that are coming into Medina. And what it said is that the starting point of the camel gets to the end of the city of Medina, and then the last camel is just entering into the city. That's how much he's got. The Prophet's wife comes and congratulates him on his wealth and says, but don't forget what the messenger told you. And Abdurrahman ibn Auf, he starts to cry and he says, all of it is given away in charity. You want to think about this for yourself. Why do you fight over the silly things you fight about? Why do you talk about people in the way that you talk about them? How does that show any indication that you understand the reality that comes in the world beyond this one? Why do you wait for someone's permission to do good things? Just go out and live with an air of recognition. People want to fight over this world, let them fight for it, man. That's why our messenger told them again and again and again, let them have this dunya. You work for something else. And it'll give you a contentment, a zeal unlike anything. You'll be able to shift inward perspective. And then the challenge when it comes will be rooted in this verse. Bima sabr. You get the jaza of Jannah because you were willing to endure against harshness outwardly, but you also stand up to whatever it is that's taking place around you. As the verse continues, it says that they will be met within that place. Tahiyatan wa salama, it says, with greetings and salams. These depictions of Jannah are important to ponder upon and reflect upon. Because when you go to Jannah, inshallah, may Allah make us all people of Jannah. You are in Jannah with everybody else that's in Jannah. Everybody knows everybody in Jannah. You will be with everybody that is meant to be in Jannah. Think about what the zeal is that you experience when you meet somebody that you were excited to meet the first time in your life. The kind of things that you go to go and see them, be greeted by them, engage them. I was speaking at a conference once in Toronto, and Cat Stevens was there, Yusuf Islam. People know who he is. And one of the days we were having breakfast all together on the top of the hotel. And my wife, some of you have met her, she's an amazing woman, but typically, especially in public, not one to display affection so much. I'm probably the quote-unquote more romantic of the two of us. You can imagine what that's like. And as we're sitting at breakfast together, side by side, she slowly starts to nudge closer to me. And I have no idea what's going on, but I'm so happy. And she takes out her phone and she says, let's take a picture together. And I'm ecstatic. And I look at her phone and I see slowly she's cutting me out of the phone. And she's bringing into the frame Cat Stevens who's sitting behind us. I said, oh, thanks. I could have just introduced you. My wife is not a huge Cat Stevens fan because of what so many people think of him. Not that that's a bad thing, but my wife is a convert to this religion. And when she converted, she didn't know any Muslims. When she was trying to understand if anybody else converted, she found amongst people who converted, the Cat Stevens had also converted. So she had a connection to him even without knowing him. When you're in Jannah, the verse is saying that the well-known and the not so well-known in a worldly sense, everybody's known. When you walk down the street and people fail to greet you, they don't acknowledge your presence, nobody's going to forget anybody in paradise. The greetings are going to come. In the Arabic tradition, what you would find culturally is when people greeted one another, you have these two words that essentially mean greetings. It's a hayat Allah. And the Quran is giving an indication to this, which is interesting, that it recognizes indigenous practice. It's not pushing it away. But it also is be able to say that perhaps that means greeting. And then when it meant salam, it's not salam as a greeting, but also in Jannah, there's only peace. There's no chaos. There's no pain. There's no stress. There's no anxiety. There's no busyness. There's no boredom. There's no abuse. There's no hardship. There's nothing like that in paradise. Why would you not want to aspire towards a kingdom? $1 is not worth the exchange of your heart. Making fun of somebody to get some laughs so that at someone else's expense you get more recognition, it's not worth it. Compromising on ethics so that you advance in a job situation, knowing fully that your movement upwards necessitates somebody else being pushed down, not okay. If everyone move forward, please. You come up. And if you're in this place where you long for someone to just notice you, you feel alone, you're by yourself, there's not people who check in on you. This verse is saying is that nobody has that experience in paradise. Nobody feels alone. People are going to greet you. They're going to provide you with inward and outward peace. There's 3 types of salams that our tradition teaches us when you're going into the next world. There's a salam that the people of Jannah give to people who are yet to enter into Jannah. There's a salam that comes from the angels to the people in that space. And then Surah Yasin teaches us that Allah himself is going to extend salam. You just want to think about what it means to live in a place that has no type of chaos to it. But it's not even the absence of chaos. Because sometimes some of us are in such dire straits that we just don't want to experience the negative anymore. This is not a space that is just absent of what is bad, but everything that is good is present in a manifold. The verse continues, Khalidina fiha, you're in it forever. You want to think, what does it mean to live forever? Hasunat mustaqarran wa muqama, it says. This is interesting because in our theology, Jannah is not a place that one is removed from once they're in it. May Allah make us people of Jannah. Our theology teaches us that people can go to Jahannam and then get removed from Jahannam. May Allah protect us from the pits of chastisement. But you don't go to Jannah and then get taken out of Jannah. And so what this verse is saying is that it's an everlasting experience. And it's a space that's going to just have goodness, happiness, contentment to it. But Jannah is the epitome of what is good. So there's no boredom in Jannah. So what you can conceptualize and fathom as an experience of increase, every single day in Jannah just gets better. It doesn't become routine. You don't get desensitized to it. You are in a sphere where it just every single day is better and better and better. You got to read your book and read it as an understanding that it provides an ethical framework as to how you can choose choices, make decisions. The Ibad al-Rahman were being told that that group of people, they are those who get access to that Jannah that these verses describe. Why would you not want to then be amongst them? You got to break out of a Sunday school knowledge of religion. You have to move past now what it is that you learned simply at the onset of your relationship with your Muslim identity. Whether you were born into it or came to it later, you can't let your heart get diluted by what is normative simply on a societal understanding. The hadith that says that Islam started as something strange and is going to end as something strange has to be something you embrace. If nobody around you thinks this way, that's okay. Not even just for your own sake, but for their sake. You got to start seeing the world the way a Muslim is supposed to see the world. So you live different. You are different. There's a different sense of morals and ethics and values that governs your decision making. So start with these verses in Surah Al-Furqan. Read them. Ponder upon them. Think about what they're calling you towards. And then go at a pace that makes sense for you. There's going to be parts to your inside when you leave. It's going to be like walking on eggshells. Because some of you have not picked up a Quran in years. You got to pick it up once before you pick it up once. Some of you judge people. And that's what keeps them from doing it. So be a means of support. If you are in a role that pushed somebody down, then 10 times over, take on a role to bring somebody back up. And all you have to do is try your best. You leave from this place, go online, smartphone, you don't have a Quran or a phone or anything, let us know, we'll give it to you. But spend some time with resources, reflect upon them, and then make dua. Ya Allah, make me from the Ibad ar-Rahman. Make me from the people of your Jannah. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم.
We hope you enjoyed our podcast. If you're inspired by the work that we're doing at the IC and want to help keep it going, subscribe to our podcasts, follow us on social media, donate to help support us at ICNYU.org, and most importantly, keep us in your continued du'as. Until next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.